Hello, everyone. This is the Vladcast program. I am your host, John Hill, and I'm here once again with Father Gregory Joyce, Reverend Father Gregory Joyce.
Hi,
Father,
John. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
It's great to be here in the parish church. And has it really been a month since the last Vladcast?
You know, it's hard to believe. Time flies. It's been a great month. A lot of things happened, and a great July coming up.
Well, what was the highlight for you of the past month? What would you say is?
You know, I really like the Feast of All Saints. I don't know why. I've always really liked that. It's the day before Lent begins, but there's just something about that feast. So, and it was really nice. We had really a lot of people at church on that feast, and it was a beautiful day. So that sort of got the month started right for me.
Now, that's the Sunday after Trinity, right?
Correct.
Is there any connection there other than it's just the next Sunday? Or
Yeah, actually, I mean, you know, the Trinity Sunday, we glorify God, the Holy Trinity, and All Saints, we glorify those who glorified God, the Holy Trinity, in their lives. So it's those two are totally connected and really, really nice feast day.
Great. Okay. Well, like you said, we've got July on the horizon, and what is for you the biggest sort of liturgical milestones in July this year?
Well, you know, July is chocked full of all sorts of feasts and really great things happening in the parish. So it's hard to really pinpoint one, but I guess for us, since this is St. Vladimir's Church, it's the 1000th anniversary of the repose of St. Vladimir. That's going to be a really big activity for our parish.
Okay, and what day is that?
That's July 28th.
Yeah.
July 28th, we have Metropolitan Jonah will be leading us in prayer that day, and the evening before, also at Vigil. And Bishop Peter has instructed all the rectors in the diocese to, if possible, close their churches and go to a St. Vladimir church near them. So we really only have 3, and for this part of the diocese, we're the only one. So we're hoping to have really a lot of people, a really good turnout, and a great celebration.
Well, do you think we should start planning for that? Maybe thinking about what it's going to involve?
It's true that some say that as Orthodox Christians we are against organized religion. However, we had to get organized this time, and we have been planning, and Marina Edwards has been leading up the planning, and things are coming together, I think, nicely. We're going to put a big tent out on the festival grounds, bring in tables and chairs and so on and so forth, and we'll have the meal out there. I think it's going to be really great. I think it's going to be a wonderful feast, and in fact, we're sort of thinking there's even going to be some people who will have to be outside during the service on St. Vladimir's Day. I mean, we want to bring everybody in, and we'll do our best, but if we don't have space, we're going to have this sound from the service broadcast outside as well. So if people do have to be outside, they'll be able to hear what's happening.
Okay. Well, if I could say one or two things about that, it would be to move towards the front of the church if you're in here for the liturgy. Don't be afraid of the altar in that. It's good. It's more, God is closer there. And please, parishioners and guests, be cognizant of your parking and don't leave huge spaces in between your cars.
Right. We hope that we'll have enough support, and I think we will, to have people out in the parking lot. You know, our old starosta, the first starosta of the parish, Milivoje Radulovic, always used to ask me to tell the people that if they come closer, there's more grace. Yeah. It's not true, but he hoped that would bring them closer to the front of to the altar. Yeah. But in any case, we'll have to do that. We won't say that, but we'll have to do that for the feast.
But you could tell them not to, like a lot of people just love the crowd in the doorway there, and then they can't get in or out, and it's just...
Right. Well, God willing, we'll be able to manage that. But I think it's going to be a good problem to have if we have so many people that we have to do that.
And I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Me too. I think it's going to be great.
And so that's pretty much it for July, or?
Oh, no. That's just scratching the surface. I mean, that's the end of the month, but so many things happen before that. So
was there something on the 12th that we don't want to forget?
There is something very big on the 12th. People get very into the fasting at this time of year and almost forget that the feast is coming where the fast will end, and that's the feast of Saints Peter and Paul. And it's a great big feast, and we've prepared for it by fasting for about a month this year. and it's on a Sunday too, which is just great. So people won't have to take off time from work to come to the feast. So that's coming up on the second Sunday of the month. So it's going to be wonderful.
So tell me a couple of things about that feast. First, what do you like to have to break the fast?
Well, for this particular fast, I have to be honest with you, what really makes it difficult for me is all of our neighbors who are barbecuing at this time of year. I mean, not that we should ask them to stop. The smells are very wonderful. But for me, I like to have a nice hamburger, barbecued on the grill that I've been abstaining from for this time. How about you?
Cheese.
Cheese?
Yeah.
I miss cheese too.
And so Peter and Paul share a feast day, and they both start with P, but is there any other reason that they...
Well, the preeminent leaders of the apostles, and of course it's very interesting. Peter came first, and Paul was added even later after Christ ascended to heaven. But they took the sort of main duties upon themselves and did a lot of the apostolic work. All of the apostles did their work and went to the places that they had been assigned when they drew lots. But nonetheless, both Saints Peter and Paul have a really significant place in the church. And so on the 12th, we have the feast of Saints Peter and Paul. And then on the 13th is the feast of the Synaxis of the 12 Apostles. So it's not that we are giving them short shrift, but Saints Peter and Paul are sort of the preeminent leaders of the apostles.
Now, I know that Peter has a couple of other feast days, like the Chains, which is in the spring. Does St. Paul have any other days where he's remembered?
There's nothing specifically set aside for him. No, there's not. It's a very interesting dichotomy between the two. But no, St. Paul this is really the big feast day of St. Paul. If someone is named after the Apostle Paul, this is their feast day.
All right.
Their name's day.
There are some memorable or important anniversaries coming up in July.
Well, speaking of names days, it's Olga Fyodorovna's day on the 24th, on St. Olga's Day, and that's also her birthday, and it'll be her 90th birthday. So it's a big deal, and so we'll be having a celebration on the 24th. It's a Friday this year.
Liturgy?
We'll definitely have liturgy, and then we'll have some sort of celebration afterwards, some sort of birthday celebration to mark the significant day of 90th birthday.
Okay.
So I think that's something very nice. One of the founding members of our parish to celebrate such a significant jubilee,
right.
And to have it be very centered in the parish, I think that's great. So we're looking forward to that as well.
Right. Okay, so St. Vladimir, 1,000, Olga Fyodorovna, 90.
Right. She's
All right.
catching up, but he's got a big head start.
Yeah. I bet she can do it, though. She's
I'm not putting anything past her.
pretty determined. Let's see. Don't we have the Bible school in the summer?
We do,
sometime?
yes. We have Vacation Bible School, and that's happening in July also. We have sort of, by tradition, begin to center this around the Feast of the Royal Martyrs, to do it on the week of the Royal Martyrs and to have a liturgy on that day. This year, that's on a Friday, and so it works out really nicely. We've got all the preparation during the whole week, and then on Friday we have the liturgy, the Feast of the Royal Martyrs, and we have, for the second year in a row now, we'll have a camp out at the Rogers farm on Friday night into Saturday morning. And
They have goats.
They have goats, they have chickens. It's really great. It's great for the kids. It's a really good experience for them to see a working farm, to be able to participate a little bit in the life of the farm. So that's kind of a nice capstone to the whole week. Liturgy, and then that sleep out on the Friday into the Saturday morning. So yeah, it's great. It's really great. But because of that, we had to move the English language cycle of services. We were going to do 17th, 18th, but we decided to move that and do the evening of the 24th and the morning of the 25th of July. So we put that in the bulletin and on the website and so on and so forth. But I think it's important to mention it here that English cycle will be the 24th and 25th.
Any significant saints besides Vladimir and Olga? And St. John of Shanghai and San Francisco.
Correct. Our Brotherhood Feast Day. Yes, that's coming up just the day after the Vladcast airs. So
Liturgy?
Liturgy. In fact, the evening of the Vladcast, when the Vladcast comes out that night, there's vigil. Vigil 6 o'clock on the 1st, and Divine Liturgy 8 o'clock on the 2nd. And, it's true that in San Francisco they celebrate the feast on the Saturday. They kind of move it to the closest Saturday. And that's, some parishes do that and some don't, but that's a tough Saturday. It's always been hard for us. It's usually the Saturday of the 4th of July weekend. And so the last couple of years we've done it on the actual day of his repose, the 2nd of July, and that's turned out better. That's even though it's a weekday, it's been easier for people to participate. So I think that's kind of become set in our parish, and we'll do that again this year. The 1st of July vigil at 6 o'clock, and then 8 o'clock on the 2nd Divine Liturgy.
8 in the morning.
8 in the morning.
Yeah.
Yep.
So are there the rector is allowed to change the celebration, or?
Yes, that's sort of within the purview, because basically we have a choice. We could serve it on the 2nd, or we could serve it on the Saturday. Okay. And so we did it on a Saturday for a while, but it was just tough. It was really hard for people. People travel on that weekend and so on and so forth. So by moving it to the 2nd, we actually got more participation. And that's the actual day that he reposed, so I think it's great that we were able to do that.
So what are the rules, written, unwritten, for what a rector can do with a feast?
Well, at least in our diocese, Bishop Peter doesn't really like the idea of moving feasts away from when they happened. That St. John's feast is sort of, that decision was made on a kind of a higher level. The synod blessed that, and that's the practice that they have in San Francisco, where St. John's relics are, and so that sort of became the practice throughout the church abroad. But in general, Vladika wants us to celebrate the feast on the day that it happens, and doesn't like the feast to be transferred to the weekends. There's a lot of advantages to that, and I really like that too. So we see that the church lives. It's not just parked on the weekends, and during the week we're pagans, and on the weekend we're Christians. I think by serving the feasts on when they actually happen, the sort of cycle, the rhythm of the church life is much stronger. People feel it much stronger, more strongly, even if they can't be here. Even if they can't be here for the feast. If people have to work in the morning, which most people will have to do, they probably don't have to work in the evening, and maybe they can scoot over after work that day and participate in the vigil, and in that way partake in the feast.
Well, are you ready for Stump the Priest? Because I've got some real stumpers for you this time.
John, I'm ready, but I forgot to mention one thing about the Feast of St. John, and that is that evening we're going to have a couple of seminarians from Stretinsky Seminary in Moscow join us.
For St. John?
Yeah, that evening they'll be here. They'll be here on the 2nd in the evening, not for the vigil, but the day of St. John's feast on the 2nd. 7 o'clock, we're going to meet at Konstantin and Albina Poplovsky's. They're going to show us a short film about Stretinsky, and then we'll have a spiritual discussion. These two seminarians are coming to the diocese to work at the ORPR camp for the month of July, basically, and to work on their English also. Both of these guys speak English. I met them when I was in Moscow. We had started the process before I went, but when I went in May, we were able to meet with them, which was great. And they're going to be working at the children's camp. But before they do that, we wanted to show them the diocese a little bit. So Father Antony Alexienko, who's also a student in the master's program at Stretinsky, is showing them around a bit. And they'll be stopping here on July 2nd. So 7 o'clock, we'll have that meeting with them. I think it'll be interesting because, people hear about Stretinsky Monastery, they hear about Stretinsky Seminary, and they hear a lot about it, they read about it, they read, Nisa Sitia, Everyday Saints, but here's an opportunity to ask questions of the people who are actually there.
Now, these are monks, novices?
Neither of them are monks. I think they're both in 3rd year. Maybe they're in 4th year. It's a 5-year program, and they're both 24 years old, so they went to college first and then went to seminary. It was really impressive, the seminary. I had been to Stretinsky in 2004, so that's a long time ago, 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. And the seminary, we were able to go on a tour of it when we were there in May, and it's really quite impressive. The program is very impressive, the facilities are very impressive. They just had their graduation not that long ago. They graduated something like 65 students. That's a lot of students in 1 year. So it's really quite an impressive program. It's really well done, and I think it's going to be great to have them and really to ask the questions of what it's kind of like to live in that environment. I mean, it's a city monastery. They're completely surrounded by city there. It's not the country at all. And to understand what that dynamic is like, I think that's interesting, because most of our monasteries abroad are very isolated from the cities. You know, they're usually out in the country. And so this is something different for us. And I think that the conversation should be really interesting. So we hope people will join us. I think it's going to be really great.
Father Gregory, why do we have a festival?
That's a great question, John. I'm glad you asked that. In fact, we had a nice meeting on Sunday, June 28th about that after liturgy during our monthly meal. And I think it's really important for people to understand the festival is a missionary effort. Yes, it's something that we can also make some money doing, and that's fine, and that's good. We exist in the world, so we need to pay our bills and so on and so forth. But the most important thing the festival does is it introduces people from the community to St. Vladimir's and to the Orthodox faith. It's true that the Orthodox faith is the second largest Christian denomination in the world, but in America it's small. And many
kind of a stealth faith.
Right, that's right.
For now.
For now, we're keeping a low profile until we, can really grow. But this is a great opportunity for us to introduce people to the faith through Russian and Ukrainian culture. It gives them a sort of a good opportunity to come by, and for us to show them a little bit about the life that we live here in our parish. The other great thing about the festival is it gives our community, our parish, the opportunity to work together in a shared goal, which is basically for the sake of Christ. If we were going to put together a business, this would not be the business we put together, right? If we were just looking to make money, we'd figure out some other way to do that. This, though, is the best thing that we've tried, and we've tried various things, to bring people in, to introduce them to us and to the faith. And so it's a great opportunity for our parishioners to work together, to do something great. It's a great opportunity to welcome really thousands of people to St. Vladimir's and to expose them to Orthodox Christianity in a positive way. So it's really important, and it's a real missionary effort. So that's what it is. It's a missionary effort, and we hope that people will get excited about that and really take advantage of this opportunity, this rare opportunity to work just for the sake of Christ, to not do it for any material gain, but to do it just because we want to expose people to our faith.
And don't worry if it makes money.
Right. I mean, we
it might rain.
Right. These things
a little bit
are above our pay grade. We can't control these things. We try to choose a time of the year when it's unlikely for the weather to be bad, and that's why we're doing it on the 19th and 20th of September this year, as opposed to we did October last year, and it was rainy. It could still rain, but God willing, and the weather is decent, we shouldn't have any financial issues. As long as we break even and we've introduced all these people to the faith, we've done great. Right. And we'll probably make some money too, because we're really looking at that closely and how we can best utilize the limited resources that we have.
So mostly people should work hard and have fun.
That's right. And you know what? Those two things are not mutually exclusive.
Well, for teenagers they are.
Well, for teenagers, that's true. But we hope that for most of us adults, those things are not mutually exclusive. You can work hard and have fun. And I think that's what we want to do. We want to work hard and have fun and do something for God's glory.
Okay.
All right?
You convinced me.
Good.
I'll help out with the festival.
Thank you, John.
Ready for another one?
I'm ready.
Okay. This has been a question that I've thought about for a while. How often, about maybe how many times a year would you say should someone take communion?
Okay, so that's a great question. I think that's a really important question, and that's a question everybody should be asking themselves, really. This is the central sort of sacramental act of our sacramental life, and so this is something we should really think about. Our bishops have asked us that at a very minimum, everyone go to confession and communion at least once during each fasting period. So that would be 4 times a year. I've found, however, over 20 years of being a priest, that for most people that's probably not quite frequent enough. To push ourselves to do something more like once about once a month or so is really
12 times?
is really good. Yes,
But I mean, you get into a fast, you might want to do it maybe more
right, exactly.
often than...
I think 12 is kind of like the baseline.
Uh-huh.
You know, that we should look at as our sort of minimum, at least once every 4 weeks or so. And one of the reasons that that's so important is because, you know, after a while, we allow our sins to be kind of like the crazy neighbor who lives over the fence. You know, we may not really want to spend time with him, but we get used to him. You know, and maybe that's not the best metaphor, but
Yeah, we're supposed to love our neighbor.
we are. That's true. But
Even the crazy ones,
that's right. We have to love everyone, but we
But
don't
we don't love the sin.
and we don't necessarily like everyone. We love everyone, right? So, but the idea is that we want to be in this struggle against our sins, so that we see them as not just something that we tolerate,
Yeah.
but something that we're fighting against.
Don't get used to them.
Right, exactly. And if we wait too long between confessions and communion, we sort of begin to tolerate them. It's good to be tolerant. It's definitely a value of Christians to be tolerant, not of our sins.
Yeah.
Hate is reserved for sins, not for people. And so I think it's very important for us to try to at least have 12 as a baseline, you know, once a month. Now, during fasting periods, it's wonderful for people to more often participate in Holy Communion. During fasting periods, we tend to be in church more often. There tend to be more services. This is especially true of Great Lent, but it always sort of works out that way, that there's more divine services during fasting times. And so we have more opportunities to partake of Holy Communion. And so I would urge people to come and talk to me about this, and that we have a conversation together, or with Father Michael, to talk about this, but to challenge themselves a little bit. You know, this is not something we should do if and when we have time to maybe squeeze it in between our other important things. This is something central to our lives. And we should really be thinking about this, scheduling this. I know it sounds silly. Why should we schedule to go to Holy Communion? If you don't put it on your schedule, something else is going to take that
you're
slot.
not going to do it.
And so I think it's good to sit down by ourselves if we're single, with our spouse if we're married, and lay out the sort of schedule. How are we going to go through this year? Where are we going to be going to confession and communion? And if we do that, if we schedule it in a very sort of open way, we know what's coming. And the beauty of that is, if you know you're going to communion next Sunday and now it's Monday, you don't have to wait to read all of your communion prayers until Saturday at the last minute. No, you should start already on Monday. Read a little bit every night and begin to already step towards Sunday, step towards that
So
sacrament.
kind of like St. Seraphim and his pear, right? Just a little bit at a time.
That's
and
right. You can't eat a pear in one bite, is what St. Seraphim used to say. And of course, it means you don't attain salvation instantaneously. This is a process.
Well, the Orthodox don't, at any rate.
Well, right, that's not how we think of that. And this is a process, but it's important to engage the process. Now, this greater process of theosis, of transformation, of transfiguration, partaking of Holy Communion, and that struggle to prepare ourselves is an important part of that. So I think, bottom line, it's important to raise this on our priority level, to not just say, well, you know, maybe I'll have some time and I'll squeeze it in sometime in a couple of months. No, this should be something that we think about and then work other things around it, not work communion around other things.
When you talked about you should hate the sin, that just got me thinking, it seems that many of us are hating other people's sins and not their own. And that seems to be a pretty serious temptation, maybe not just lately, but I mean throughout human history.
I agree with you. That is a big temptation. I will not say that judging is a universal sin, but that is one of the ones that we hear a lot in confession. You know, God gave us the ability to discern, to observe, to even predict, to understand what's likely to happen. So if we're walking, I don't know why we'd be walking down a dark alley, but let's say we're walking down a dark alley. Here comes someone in a trench coat, and you know, he begins to reach into his pocket. It looks like it's something ominous. We don't have to say, no, I'm not judging. Let's just see what happens. We're allowed to use the brain that the Lord gave us. We're allowed to turn around and walk away from this person who might mug us or do something worse to us.
So don't be naive and
Exactly, but most sins are just an extreme form of something that's good, right? This is a good example of that. We don't sin if we see that something is likely to happen here, which is dangerous. But if we start to think about how bad some other person is, or how much better we are than another person, well, then we're falling into the sin of judging. The reason it's a sin, that's God's work. The Lord is to judge. We don't understand the depth of His wisdom. So to us, to judge, it's just so simplistic. We do it in such a very simple and rough way.
Without knowing the whole story.
Right, whereas God knows the whole story. He sees the person wholly, their weaknesses, their strengths, their character, all of these things that go into understanding their actions. And so it's really important for us to not judge. It's not a sin to see someone else sin, right? So if I see someone do something which is sinful, I don't sin. My sin comes when I begin to think, I'm better. That person sinned and therefore I'm better. When we see someone sin, our answer should be, Lord, help me to think about my sins and not to concentrate on my brother's sins. And if we do that, we won't fall into being judgmental. We'll begin to turn to our own sins and ask the Lord to help us with those sins. Then we can pray for our brother in a sincere way, not sort of, oh Lord, please help him because I'm so much better. That's not really a prayer. Lord, please help that person to save their soul because they're sinning and hurting themselves. That's not judging. You know, we don't judge the sky by noticing that it's blue. It's blue. We don't sin because our brother sins. We sin when we begin to think that we're better and forget about our own sins. Father Paul used to say, and I really like this, when you point at someone, you have 3 fingers pointing back at yourself. That is a very good sort of conceptual way to think about our interaction with our brothers. Let's concentrate on our own sins and struggling against those, and we won't spend so much time thinking about our brother's sins.
So is there any level of spiritual development or attainment that a person would not even would stop seeing another person's sins? They would be so focused on their own and eye on the prize, looking forward to Christ?
You know, the fathers use a metaphor of light. So when you begin to seek God, you're far from that light. If we think of God as a light, as pure, like the transfiguration, right? So not a lot of the light is shining on you. So you seem to be in a very good place. It's kind of like when you get dressed in the dark because you don't want to wake up your wife because you're getting up early.
I did that one time, and I put 2 different color shoes on.
Exactly, and that's the thing. As you come closer to the light, you see better your weaknesses. That maybe you're not dressed so nicely. That maybe you don't match. That maybe there's some holes in your clothes. Whereas when you're far away, you don't see that. So as we grow closer to Christ, we should be focusing more on ourselves. I don't know if that ever means we don't see our brother's sins, because we also do need to pray for those who are struggling. You know, it's an important part of being an Orthodox Christian to pray for others and to sincerely desire their salvation. So I don't know that we ever don't see the sins of others, but, well, if I ever attain to any of that, getting closer to the light, I'll be able to share more with you. But I think that it's probably something like we see that, but we're less likely to judge it because we're much more empathetic, because we don't see ourselves as so perfect anymore.
Yeah.
We see our own sins, and therefore we're much more empathetic to our brother's sins.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Thank you. I mean, that's just a real sort of tough thing to figure out, or even find a position on, because it's the moat and the beam. And,
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
But if we can think about our own sins when we're tempted by our brother's sins, then we're more likely to pray for him and sincerely desire his salvation, as opposed to judge him.
Yeah. So do you need to be conscious of another person's sins? Does that sort of motivate the praying for them? I mean...
Well, I think it's helpful if we see that someone is hurting themselves. You know, if we saw someone was banging their head against a wall, let's say, we would be empathetic. We would feel bad for that person. We won't even try to stop them from doing that. And the same thing should be when we see someone doing something which is bad for their soul. Unfortunately, our first instinct is not to be sympathetic or empathetic or helpful, it's to judge. At least if we can repent after we do that and ask the Lord to forgive us and pray for that person's salvation, that's a good start. And if we can make that our regular habit, eventually we will get to the point where we're not judging and we just begin to pray for the person.
Well, you feel like you're ready for a couple more stumpers, or should we call it quits?
I feel almost stumped out, John.
Okay.
I think that's probably good for this week and for this month, but I would really encourage people to send in their questions. It's really important for us, you know. Not that I have the answer to everything, and not to sort of ruin the surprise, but you know, we do go over these before we film, so that I have a chance to think about it or read something or look it up, and so that we can give a good answer. So please send us your questions. If you have a question, probably other people that you know have questions too. They're maybe afraid to ask. Just send us an email or hand us a piece of paper, and we'll be happy to address your question.
I had a great time talking to you. It was spiritually fulfilling.
Thank you, John.
And
Me
my
too.
pleasure. Let's maybe do it again next month.
I think we should. I'm looking forward to
Okay.
August. It's another good month. Lots of things happening in August.
All right. Well, I can hardly wait.
Me too.
So join us again in 1 month for the August Vladcast. Until then, come to the festival. Have a great month. Goodbye.